Martin. First thing that he is, and the most important thing, he's an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Westmount. He was a member of Parliament for the riding of LaSalle-Aymar from 1988 to 2008. He was the Minister of Finance for Canada from 1993 to 2002. He was the Prime Minister of Canada from 2003 to 2006. And in 2012, he was appointed a companion to the Order of Canada. After leaving public life, Mr. Martin advised the African Development Bank and worked closely with the Advisory Council of the Coalition for Dialogue on Africa. He's also the founding co-chair of the Congo Basin Forest Fund and a commissioner of the Global Ocean Commission. In 2008, along with his family, Mr. Martin has founded the Martin Family Initiative, a charitable organization committed to improving the education, health, and the overall well-being of Indigenous people in Canada. Since its inception, the MFI has sought to walk the path with Indigenous people as they define their priorities and their goals, bridging the gap between needs and available resources. To this end, the MFI gathers the most relevant expertise coupled with Indigenous-based knowledge to co-develop, support, and implement innovative programming and networks. And like every good man, he's backed up by a good woman. He's married to Sheila Ann Cohen, and they have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren. With that, Mr. Martin, I invite you to take the floor, and we're really looking forward to this. Wonderful to have you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Is Glenn Shepherd there?
Yes.
Okay, because I blame Glenn Shepherd, and you should too, about he's the one that asked me if I would talk about my family's initiative and the place of First Nations in Canada. So if it goes well, I'll take credit. If it doesn't, I think we could blame Glenn. But essentially, I also want to talk about something else, and that I discussed with Glenn, and that is the importance of Rotary in all of this. The fact is that everywhere I go, I don't know how to describe this, and sometimes when I talk about one of our new programs in Vancouver, Rotary has played a very important role. So what I'd like to do is to go through our 3 of our programs, and then I'd like to take a slightly larger vista on the economy as it applies to all of this. The first program that I would describe to you is our early years program. Quite simply, the first 5 years of your life are the most important years that you will ever spend. This is when your brain, which is really very malleable, comes home. It's when you develop the ability to understand, the ability to talk, the ability to make decisions. All of this comes from those 5 years. And consequently, if those are a highly stressed 5 years, or if there's anything the problem, it does stay with you for many years of your life. As a result of that, given the effect that poverty has often on those 5 years, we have created, it's not our creation, other people have done it, but no one has done it the way that we have done it, is created a home visitor program. Essentially, as an example, the number of teenage pregnancies on reserve is very high. And oftentimes, many of these young women have no one there to guide them and to help them. And so a home visitor is a mother, a former, or a mother from the community. She would be in her 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. She was a successful mother. And we advertised for them, said we had a training program that would teach them not how to raise children, but how to teach new mothers how to raise children. And it has been, I must say, a huge success. We did a pilot project in a community called Ermiskin, which is about 45 minutes, a Cree community, about 45 minutes south of Edmonton. And in this community, we went in, we advertised, we hired the home visitors, we got a supervisor from the community who had been a nurse, had been there for some 20 years. And we did this because this was the first time that we had ever done it. And it's, I think, probably the first time in the way that we're doing it was ever done in Canada, and probably North America. We did an enormous amount of work on what it would entail, but we recognized from the get-go that this had to be a joint venture, that we couldn't develop this. It had to be co-developed with the community. Not only did it have to be co-developed with a community who were First Nations, but it had to, in this particular case, be co-developed with Cree. Because if you went to another community, if in fact they were Blackfoot or whatever it was, each culture had its own approach, and that had to be recognized. This was not our show. We were simply there. We were simply there to help. And to make a long story short, we were in Ermiskin for 3 or 4 years. We worked with the home visitors. We developed a program. We co-developed the program with them, and it was a huge success. So as a result of that, we then applied to Ottawa. The pilot project was paid for by us, but if the project worked, it would fit within Ottawa's preventative issues, and so then the community made an application to Ottawa, and Ottawa agreed. We continued with our pilot project, our pilot program, which was essentially a 4.5-year program, but we were going to go as long as we had to do it. The interesting thing about proving it is that within 3 years of doing this program, 2.5 years of doing this program, 3 Cree communities from the vicinity applied to have it. They saw what was happening. They saw what was happening with the mothers, and they just simply said they want the program. We went in, we helped them. We did the co-developing within their communities, and we worked it out, and it was a success. And I'll just tell you, it's not only the statistics that the scientists will show you that demonstrate when something is a success. When I knew that the program was really working was after about 1.5 years. What we would do is that the home visitors, we had initially 9 home visitors, would have luncheons with the mothers. And you'd get up to about 40 mothers per community, and would have these little luncheons with the mothers, and all the mothers would come together and all of the chat. And I would go up, and 99% of the time, I was the only male there, until one time I went up, and it was full of young men, and I couldn't understand what they were all doing there. I didn't know who they were, and so I went over to one of the young men, and I said, "Who are you guys, and what are you doing here?" And he looked at me as if I could, what kind of a strange beast was I, and looked at me, and he said, "Well, we're the fathers." And I said, "My God, where have you been?" He said, "We're here. We can't believe what has happened with our wives. We can't believe how they've taken charge. They can't believe how good it is at home." And it was probably the strongest endorsement of the program that I've ever seen. These young men who were not very interested at the beginning were developing a huge interest. So that is the first program that I would talk about. I'm delighted to answer any questions that you have on it. The second program that I would discuss with you within Indigenous Canada is our literacy program. If you just to put you in the date, the early years was the most recent program. It's the one that is now expanding. It's going to be expanding across the country. Just to tell you again, I'm doubling back on the early years. It's we have not sought any communities. It's all getting word of mouth, and you can imagine word of mouth in the times of COVID is not easy. But we got a call from Pond Inlet, which is from Nunavut, with the Inuit. We're going into the Yukon eventually. COVID has held it up, but nonetheless, the Yukon has approached us, and 9 communities in Vancouver Island have called us, said they want to have it. And I will tell you, this is where you Rotarians should be very, very proud. the fact is that I went to a meeting. They called a meeting of all of the communities at one point. This is when people could still travel. And I went to it in Vancouver. And Rotary was all over the place, helping, giving advice to the communities, working with the communities. It was very evident that the people from Rotary were there who knew the members of the 9 Vancouver Island communities that were there. And there was a strong friendship and a real sense of partnership. And every time I've gone anywhere, and I did mention this one at the last meeting, and I'll just say it again, but every time I've gone anywhere where Rotary is, there is a good feeling. This was the same thing. And I mentioned this at that last meeting that we had when I went over to Africa on the question of polio. And one of the first questions that was asked is, do you know people from Rotary? So you should feel very good about yourselves with considerable justification. The next program after the early years is our literacy program. If you can't read and write, by the end in grade 3, as a young student, you will get passed into grade 4 and you won't be able to read and write. And you get passed into grade 5, you won't be able to read and write. And eventually you'll just simply drop out. And this was a real problem. On reserve, at the time that we went in to do this early literacy program, 13% of students on reserve could read and write at the end of grade 3, compared to in Ontario, where they did the comparison, 70% could read and write. So we went in with this program, which is one that had been developed by the Ontario government many years earlier. We just took the program, took it in, hired the teachers, and in this one school, and then another one after, as a pilot project. And just, I guess best to summarize what happened was in one of the communities, this is Kettle and Stony Point in Vancouver, it's near Brantford. The results came in from the program 3 years later. And the chief called a meeting of all of his members, but also the adjacent communities, the non-Indigenous communities, to say what had happened. And he stood up in front of the audience as a result of this literacy program, and he looked out and he said, you don't think that we can do it, but we can do anything. And he said, and then he said, 3 years ago, 13% of our kids could read at the end of grade 3. At that time, Ontario's 70% could read at the end of grade 3. And I'm here to announce to you that the results now determined by an objective test says that 81% of our students can read at the end of grade 3. And he said, you may think we can't do anything. You may think you may doubt our capacity to act. Let me tell you, give us the tools and we will do anything. I've got to tell you that give us the tools and we will do anything has really become my motivational idiom. And that's that school. We're now in 18 schools across the country. We formed a network. And what the network is really doing is teaching other teachers in other schools who apply how to basically teach reading and writing, teaching literacy. And I must say, I think it's working very well. And then the next program that I would talk to you about is, and there is a reason why I left it to the end, and that is our business program. Now, our business program breaks down into a number of programs. One is simply teaching business. It came about because I noticed that throughout the country, in most high schools, provincial high schools, they teach business. But none of that business course has nothing to do with Indigenous kids. And so there's no way that they can adapt to it. And so I said, okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to take 1 year, teach that business course that's taught in the schools, and to a group of kids from fly-in communities down the shores of Hudson's Bay, this at a place called Cromarty, just north of Thunder Bay, to see if, in fact, it makes sense for us to do this program. And at the end of the year, teaching the Ontario course as it was to a bunch of kids who come from these communities down the shores of Hudson's Bay. I said, what did you think about the course? And they said, well, it was very interesting, but we're not going to take it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the kids, and they all said the same thing. They said, every one of your role models is non-Indigenous. And we know there are a lot of Indigenous business people out there, and you didn't mention one. He then went on to say, the other thing in this thing is it all takes place in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, all these big cities. We don't live in those big cities. We live in very small communities in the north, and you didn't once mention them. And of course, that confirmed it. What we then did is we went and we hired some writers, hired some teachers, got a publisher, Nelson Publishing, which is a big textbook publisher, and we designed a whole new set of textbooks and teachers' workbooks, teaching the course, all of which based on Indigenous cultures, and all of them with Indigenous role models, and all of them situate with Indigenous communities. And the course has been a huge success. We're now in 45 high schools across the country. We've had over 5,000 people take the course in the last 10 years. And it was all supported by these textbooks and these workbooks, which have really changed the ballgame. And so much so that while these are all taught in high schools, we were then approached by a group of chiefs from Manitoba who said, we've had kids dropping out of school. And if you taught this course as a 60-hour course, if you just had a sort of a resume of the course, we think you may be to interest these kids. They may learn something if they go to get a trade, but they also may go back to school. And we did it. And that's what it's happened. Many of them have gone back to school, or others of them have simply gone into business of their own. And then the final thing that we've got as part of this whole business issue is that we have formed a mentoring program in association with a legal firm, McCarthy Tetro, but also with the Association of Professional Accountants. And that mentoring program has been huge because, and they're here again, I talked to Rotary, the ability of somebody to sit down with a young man or woman who has never seen the inside of a business office, who doesn't know what basic business is, except the little thing they may see in a small community, to sit down with them and talk to them about what business is all about and how they can succeed is the difference between night and day. And the same thing, and I would raise it with you today, summer jobs. If you've never been in business, if you've never seen business, and all of a sudden you get a summer job that sees where you can see business operate, it makes a huge difference. I know, I mean, listen, I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, in a normal family and that kind of thing. I didn't know the first thing about business until I got a job on a fishing boat when I was 14, and I saw what that did. And then I got a job driving a truck on a construction job when I was 16, 17. And that's where I basically started to understand what business was all about. And summer jobs are incredibly important. And I think it's something that we should really look at. Now, there are three more points that I would make, and I know I'm probably going over your time limit. Let me just say the next program that we're now about to start, we haven't started, we're still doing the work on it, are creating greenhouses. Food security is a massive issue. It's the unknown issue in most countries, and it certainly is in Canada. And the ability to have good food is crucial. And if you live in a northern community, the cost of vegetables, the cost of fruit is staggering because they have to get it up there. And consequently, it's just not eaten the way it is down south. And greenhouses are the answer. And so we're now starting, we work with the community, get a pilot project in the middle of Saskatchewan, La Crosse, a Métis community, where we've now got a successful greenhouse. And what we want to do is to basically expand the building of these greenhouses. And we are thinking of doing it, joining it to our business course, essentially so that the students can see what happens is if you grow something and you sell it and you make a profit and it supports the greenhouse, that's the way it would go. So that is one issue that I wanted to bring. The second one is there's an organization which I think the Rotary might like to meet, and that's the Guardians. The Guardians these are all First Nations people who have developed, have a very deep understanding of biodiversity, but they also have a very deep understanding of business. And they're doing a lot of good work out there. And I think that if you had contact with these people, it would be of great interest to you, and I think of great benefit to them. Now, the last thing that I will raise with you, the world has changed. The world has changed within the last month and a half enormously. I don't know how many of you read about this, but a month and a half ago, the Mi'kmaq nations of Nova Scotia bought, in partnership with someone else, bought the largest seafood company, Clearwater Seafoods, in Canada. This is huge. What this means is, and they've talked about, this means that there is a major company owned by the Mi'kmaq, the company that will obviously deal with their fishing industry, which is a very important industry. But it also means that this is a vehicle whereby young Mi'kmaq can start to rise in the corporate, make the corporate ascent, and it's going to play a huge role. The second part of that whole event occurred in Quebec, when you can understand that for year after year, the Innu, which is a very large community, 9 communities, has had their difficulties with Hydro-Quebec, of course, that wants to dam up streams and basically create hydroelectricity. And there's been a constant problem. Well, what's happened is that Hydro-Quebec and the Innu communities in Quebec have done a deal whereby they're going to take some of the traditional land of the Innu, and they're going to turn it into a wind farm. And the wind farm, which will be owned by the Innu and by a company called Boralex, which is expert in the field, will then sell the electricity to Hydro-Quebec, who will then have got a contract to sell it to the United States. And so think about this, what has been a traditional battle between the First Nations and the hydro companies by creating a renewable energy wind farm. And in fact, what they're doing is they're not only setting aside all those battles, but they're creating a whole industry where the First Nations can lead. And this is really important. What we've got to understand is that the First Nations have been shut out of the economy. And what we've really got to do is to understand that they have got to be, not only do they have to be presented with the economy, they've got to be helped participate. This is the youngest and the fastest growing segment of our population. And those of you who are looking at me in this thing can understand that an awful lot of us are getting pretty old. And what we need is that the next generation be ready to take the economy over. And this is the youngest segment of our population. We're not going to be able to compete with anybody if we just simply let the youngest and the fastest growing segment of our population simply operate in some far away place and not operate in the businesses of today. And given what is happening with the need to prepare for COVID, given what is happening with the need for climate change, there is an enormous opportunity for the First Nations to participate, and that will benefit every single Canadian. And I believe that Rotary can play a great deal in this game. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Hooray.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, for that amazing talk and for your dedication to those programs. We do have a few questions. Did the success of the early years program open the door for you for the literacy program?
No, it was it was the other way around. I actually went in reverse because I wanted to end on the business course because I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happened with Clearwater, with the opening to the other businesses. The actual way those programs were introduced, the first program the first program that we did was well, we actually, I don't want to, the literacy program was our second program. It was, what happened with us is we started with the business program first. I'd come from the business community, and then I spent a little bit of my time, as you know, as Minister of Finance. And so that's all I ever thought about for a while. And so when I left government after being Prime Minister, what I thought about was business. And we did the business program first. It followed with the literacy program. And then we did the early years, the program, which actually was in probably reverse of the way we should have done it, but we didn't. But when I was going to make the presentation to you, I wanted to end with the business program, just simply so that it would be a lead into what happened with Clearwater and with in Quebec.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, how many bands or communities are there, and how many have you been involved with so far?
There are over 600, and we've been involved. Well, it depends what you're talking about as involved. If you're talking about how many have I visited, how many have I talked to, hundreds. But how many are we really involved in? Probably, I would say, off the top of my head, 30.
Okay, thank you. We have Rod here with what an amazing success story in the greenhouse program, which I imagine is quite energy intensive. And many of these communities rely on expensive diesel generators. Is it cheaper than flying in produce?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Mr. Martin, that's
well, okay. I can tell you that the numbers that are coming out of Isle La Crosse, which is the one community that we're actively involved in, and you notice that we always do start with a pilot project. It is not only is it cheaper for them to do it, but in point of fact, they can make money at it, which is they use to fund other business programs for their students. So the answer is yes, it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. Yes, thank you. With the changing economic environment, do you think the upcoming universal income initiatives will help or hinder the Indigenous community?
I think it depends on how big the universal income is. If the universal income is a sufficient size, I think it will help. I don't argue against universal income, but what the only thing that would worry me is that the monies that are allocated to universal income mean that other programs aimed at people who need it even more may be short-circuited. So what I think has to be done is that, and I think the priority would have to go to those programs where people desperately need it. I think that they've got to make sure that they are properly funded. If you can do that and do the universal income, do it. If you can't, then I think that you've got to give the priority to helping people who desperately need that money.
Okay, thank you. We'll do a couple more. Otherwise, we're going to keep you here all day, especially if I read all of the thank yous for your talk. In what language were you teaching the literacy programs, English or Indigenous?
That's a very good question. We taught it in when we started. We taught it in English, but again, we go back to the purpose of a pilot program is to proceed, but recognize that maybe you're going to make mistakes, or to proceed and maybe there are some things that you can do different. So our literacy program was a huge success, and we felt that when you use that, when it came time for them to bring in the Indigenous language, they could use the same methods in the second language. No, it's not unusual that a number of communities have said they wanted to start with the First Nation language first. And they're in the process of working that out.
Okay. Is there a program for young men to support the mothers of their children?
One of the things that we would like to work on is the need to support the young mothers is crucial. And as much as we possibly can, we work to have the young men involved. There's no doubt that we are succeeding to a certain extent, but that we have got a long way to go, if that's the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
We're not there.
Yeah. I have a question on wind farms. Could small wind farms be used to supply energy to remote communities?
Well, we believe so. We believe so, and the price of wind farms, the electricity from wind farms has dropped dramatically. If you take a look at the numbers that came out of the Innu deal with Hydro-Quebec, and they talked about the price of the wind farms. There's been a dramatic decrease in recent months. I am not an expert on the whole question, but I read the documentation, and they said the prices have come down, and the answer is yes. If what you were to do further up north in some of these communities where you could provide renewable energy, and there are a lot of people who are doing it. This is one of the things that people don't realize. I only realized it when I really got involved, is that there are a lot of very small wind farms out there, and they've got all the costs. And certainly, as I understand it, yes, they can do it on a cost competitive basis.
Thank you. So I'll just end with this one, and that is where we can find information on the greenhouse program if it exists on the web. So maybe when you have a moment, if you have general information on the programs that you want to just send to Glenn, that would be really great, and we can pass them around.
Well, I would be delighted to send it to Glenn, and I will. I want to be very clear, however, on I thought I made it clear when I introduced the greenhouse program. We have only done, I described our methodology. We have an idea, study it enough to say, okay, let's give it a try. We don't reinvent the world massively on the next day, but we do a pilot project. We have done a pilot project in Isle La Crosse. We have got working with the community, very much with the community. We have got an environment and a greenhouse, and we're in the process of looking at it. And we're only now beginning to take a look at how we're going to expand. Okay, so that, unlike the other programs which I talked to, the reason that I brought the greenhouse up at the end is it is a program which we're just in the process of putting together. We have one pilot project. We're looking at 3 communities where we may do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that concludes the questions. Thank you very much. And Jim?
Mr. Martin, you had your finger up. Would you like to say something else?
Well, I do it. It depends. If this is the end, I want to say something about Rotary. So if this is the end, can I just say something?
Certainly, you can stay all day.
I talked to you briefly when we went into the communities in Vancouver Island with the early years. The early years is a very new program. It's very successful, but it's about 2.5 years old. And I went in to speak to the communities, and it happened 2 times in Vancouver Island, 2 different parts of the island. Rotary was there, and it was so incredibly evident the degree to which there were friendships across the table between Rotary and the communities, and that the community that Rotary was working with them, and they were not working with them saying this is what you should do. They're saying, what can we do to help? And I've got to say that every time I've seen Rotary at work, that what can I do to help is important. And I really would actually, I really would suggest that one of the things that Rotary could consider anywhere is this question of summer jobs for young people who are taking business courses or in high school, because it's the only place they're going to learn. But set that aside. The fact is that these communities right now are going, the world is going through some huge change, and there are great changes taking place in these communities, and they want it to happen, and they're working. But the friendship that can come from the adjacent communities where Rotary is can make the difference. And I just want to say, you're doing it. So thank you.
Mr. Martin, can you give us a couple examples of what the Rotary clubs have been doing? Like, are they going, like, as an example, would they be going and doing home visitor programs and
No,
mother?
no, they're not doing home visitor programs, but they will go in when all of a sudden the community is running down and they need a lawyer. Oh my God, who are we going to get? Rotary will say, okay, we'll get you a lawyer and we'll help you out. In a couple of instances, the Rotary has somebody said, look, here's a young man, I'll be a mentor. Mentorship is phenomenally important. Or they'll say, okay, look, if you're looking for a summer job, I'll give you a summer job, because that's so important. So it can be friends, it could be giving advice. So that, I mean, if you're a Rotarian and you're a lawyer or you're an engineer or you're a business person, and all of a sudden I've opened up I don't care, whatever, I've opened up a store. I'm Indigenous and I want to open up a store in my community. Well, it's not a bad thing for somebody who's run a small store to come and tell me what it's all about, know what it's like. It's the ability to learn from somebody else's experience.
Excellent, thank you very much. Before you run off, I'm going to ask David Franklin to express our thanks to you. David, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Mr. President, thank you so much for giving me the privilege of thanking the Right Honourable Paul Martin. You know, we have been looking forward for several months to his presentation, and we're delighted to be here to hear his message. We're also delighted that he's an honorary member of our club and that he holds in such high regard of the involvement of Rotary in his programs throughout Canada. We applaud, Mr. Martin, your initiative of seeing what the Indigenous population needs, what they need, namely guidance for young mothers, an incredible success story about literacy, the involvement of the community in business, and the success of your program is indicated by people calling you for guidance. You're building a stronger Canada through your efforts. You, as a Rotarian, certainly have fulfilled the goals of Rotary. Service before self. You have participated in public life and now helping others in need. We congratulate you, and we hope that next year you'll come back and tell us more of your outstanding success. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. I'm going to print that up and give it to my sons. That's very kind.
It's not copyrighted.
And it's all genuine, absolutely. Mr. Martin, again, to close, I'll thank you very much. I know that you probably have a fairly busy schedule, so you're free to join us for the rest of our meeting. Again, feel free to slip out anytime you need to. And with that,